I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. On February 8, 2015, Adam Brunt, a firefighter trainee from the Durham region, tragically lost his life during a private safety training exercise in Hanover. Sadly, this was not an isolated incident. 5 years earlier, volunteer firefighter Gary Kendall of Point Edward was also killed during a training exercise with the same private company. Shortly after Adam's passing, I was joined by the Brunt and Kendall families in this very room to call for a coroner's inquest and regulation of the private safety training industry. It is an industry that operates devoid of the very thing it is meant to improve, safety. 2.5 years later, and the coroner's inquest has been completed, but sadly the industry remains completely unregulated and unsafe. Quite simply, the Wynne government is failing to protect firefighters and firefighter trainees in Ontario, and it is time for that to change. Last week, I introduced a private member's motion calling for the full and immediate adoption of the recommendations of the coroner's inquest into Adam's and Gary's deaths. That motion will be debated in the legislature this afternoon. And today I am once again joined by the families of Adam Brunt and Gary Kendall calling for action. We want to ensure that the inquest was more than just a public relations exercise for the government. We want to ensure that no more families are forced to face the tragedies that they have endured. We want to ensure that Ontario firefighters and firefighter trainees are afforded the same protections that they afford us. The purpose of the inquest was to get answers, and now we have them. Today, we implore the government to do the right thing, support this motion, and immediately adopt the full recommendations of the coroner's inquest before another tragedy occurs. I want to finish by thanking all those in attendance today, and by introducing our panel, who will each deliver brief remarks. First, we have Adam's father, Al Brunt. Al.
Good afternoon. Many already know the story of our son Adam, who passed away, on February 8th, 2015, while participating in an ice cold water rescue training course. At the time, Adam was a pre-service firefighting student at Durham College, and he was taking this private course to enhance his resume. As the investigation into our son's death proceeded, we were shocked to learn that there were little to no policies, regulations, or legislation to protect future first responders while they participate in training. From that moment forward, my family and I made a commitment in honor of our late son to promote safety and appropriate safety practices for all training activities for firefighters and pre-service firefighting students. Firefighters risk their lives on a regular basis in order to protect others. We owe it to them to ensure there is no undue risk while they are undergoing training. After the death of our son, we were introduced to the Kendall family, who also experienced a similar tragedy, losing their husband and father, Gary. Gary, a volunteer firefighter, passed away during a similar training exercise as Adam. Together, our families persevered, and we were successful in demonstrating to the coroner's office why it is imperative that we needed to learn from these two deaths. An inquest was granted to look into both deaths. The inquest was completed in June of this year, and the jury put forth several recommendations. Today, we are here at Queen's Park to watch a private member's motion that is asking that the government adopt the inquest recommendations. It's a great step forward in fulfilling our commitment to our son, and I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the many people who have supported our efforts, and my family and I look forward to seeing changes in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. Second, we have Gary's daughter, Marissa Kendall. Marissa?
The Kendall family is grateful to the chief coroner for holding an inquest into the deaths of my dad and Adam Brunt. We are also grateful to the jury for making meaningful recommendations. We have waited 7 long years. They've been emotional and stressful for this inquest. And it's unfortunate that without Adam's death, it probably never would have happened. To MPP Jennifer French, thank you so much for carrying the torch for my dad and for Adam and not losing hope. You've been a true friend and advocate for our family. We give heartfelt thanks to our friends for their support, in particular Wes Mazur and TJ Thompson, and to the Brunt family for their friendship, and to Alex Van Kraligen for his kindness, assistance, and legal assistance. We also want to take this opportunity to clarify 2 points from these tragedies which have become a misconception. The instructor stated that during the inquest, nothing could have been done to save Adam Brunt. This is far from the truth. The evidence at the inquest absolutely suggests the contrary. The inquest jury ruled that the death is accidental. However, both accidents were preventable and the product of negligence. We are grateful to be in attendance today as MPP French's bill is debated in the legislation, which is an honor to my father and to Adam. It is a bittersweet day for our family, as our family continues to mourn our loss. We call on our government to now fully adopt the recommendations from the coroner's inquest and to pass this bill, because future deaths can and must be prevented. In life, my dad and Adam were 2 truly remarkable individuals. In death, they are still giving themselves. Thank you.
Thanks, Marissa. And finally, Alex Van Kralogen, who represented the Kendall family at the inquest. Alex?
Yes, I'm one of the lawyers who represented the Kendall family at the recent coroner's inquest dealing with Gary and Adam's deaths. The importance and urgency of Ms. French's motion can only be understood when you consider the history of these deaths and the associated history of government inaction since 2010. After Gary died in 2010, the Kendall family immediately recognized the underlying systemic issues surrounding this sort of training, that there is no regulation of single-skill firefighter training, no one to ensure that those participating in these training courses were being taught appropriate curriculum or were being trained in a safe way. Quite frankly, no one in this government would listen to the Kendall family. The coroner's office refused to call an inquest at that time, and Gary's story faded into the background. And then Adam died in 2015, and in the wake of Adam's death, in early 2015, ministers of this government stated that they were going to address the problem. But despite those statements, nothing has been done since Adam's death to remedy this issue. At the coroner's inquest, I expressly asked the representatives of the relevant ministries and the Ontario Fire College if they were aware of any concrete steps being taken to draft legislation or regulations to remedy the problem. None of those government representatives could point to anything that had been done. They also said they had no idea how many of these unregulated courses were being offered around the province. What they did say, though, is that if the relevant ministries were waiting for the jury's recommendations to inform their approach. I can tell you that at the time, the families took those comments in good faith. Now the government has set an expectation that it has to act. And so now the jury's recommendations are in, and the issue is becoming urgent because the icy water conditions that killed both Gary and Adam will be coming in a few months, and this sort of ice water training is inherently dangerous. The circumstances surrounding Gary and Adam's deaths show that we need appropriate oversight and regulation. I will tell you what I told the jury in my closing submissions. It is crazy, given everything that we regulate in our everyday lives, that this sort of high-risk and technical firefighting training is not regulated. The government has the power to fix this problem, and this matter needs to be dealt with now, especially given this government's history of inaction. This is not a partisan issue. Keeping firefighters and pre-service students safe is not controversial. With that in mind, my hope is that Ms. French's motion will prompt the government to do the right thing. I am urging all MPPs from across party lines to vote in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you to everyone on the panel and here today for being here, and we are happy to take questions.
I'm JP with the French ABC. We've met during the inquest. Correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the main recommendations was to suspend until further notice any exercises in cold water, rough water, I don't know how you say it in English, until the government, the province, finds a place where to do those exercises in water safely. I thought the government acted on this single recommendation. No, not even? Do you know?
My understanding is that that has not happened yet.
Not even this one?
Not, and just to be clear, the recommendation was also to convene a subject matter expert group to determine when and how this could be done safely. That hasn't been done either, from my understanding.
Okay, I will I will contact the Minister Lalonde, but maybe Jennifer, you can explain us why the government or the minister hasn't done anything, even just on this single recommendation, which is the most logical to be done during the summertime before winter.
I think you raise an excellent question, and I would appreciate knowing the answer. What we're calling for today is that all of the recommendations be taken in their entirety because, and I know that you were at the inquest, the recommendations are based on all of that expert and family and professional involvement and expertise. So they shouldn't be cherry picking, through them and pick a few favorites. That said, when you look at the recommendations and you see that there are some that would make immediate sense to adopt, I don't know why they haven't made commitments. Because to Alex's point, winter is coming, and we're sitting here because we know about the dangers and the risks, and we want to prevent that.
Is it a question of just money and it's going to be expensive, or it's more a question that if the government finally suspends and find a place where to do those exercises, there's a liability issue here and they might be sued?
Without getting too into the specifics, much of what came out of the inquest was about the need for training and whether or not there was the need. So to suspend until they've done the math on that, to suspend training until they can ensure that it's safe, I don't know if there would be a cost associated with that would even remotely compete with the cost of losing another community member. This has been a 2.5-year process since Adam's passing, certainly longer for the Kendall family. I don't know that funding or cost has been anywhere near this. It has strictly been a matter of the time and the interest in unraveling a tangled situation and ensuring it doesn't happen again. So, we've sat at this table calling on the government to make changes. We're here again, and hopefully this will be the last time, and we will have commitment from the legislature to adopt these recommendations and close the loophole.
Do you have a chance it might pass as a private bill, or?
This is a motion, and I am always optimistic. I certainly can't imagine the rationale for not supporting the motion and not adopting these recommendations. This came from a very important process that we look to find answers. We now have those answers and we have recommendations. I can't imagine how the government would be able to get away with saying that we don't value those and aren't going to adopt them. So,
but your bill shows maybe a lack of leadership from the government. If a private bill has to go forward when it comes to saving lives, doesn't that tell you something about the lack of leadership maybe of the government?
It does, and here as we're debating this motion, if depending on what we see in terms of government leadership and commitment to action, I am happy to continue working with these families. So if it comes to tabling legislation to give them another kick as needed into action, then that may be our next conversation. So today is the motion, and if the next step is private members' legislation, then that's our next step.
I'm a justice reporter. I'm not a Queen's Park reporter. Could you
welcome.
Could you help me a little bit with the timeline? How does it work in Queen's Park when you will present or it has been presented, I think, already?
It was tabled last week. Well, it's been tabled, and now what will happen is it's my private members' debate slot, and this is the issue that we're bringing forward. We're going to have a fulsome conversation and debate across all of the parties, and then at the end of today's session, we will vote on whether or not to adopt the motion. So, as I said, I'm optimistic, but it is Queen's Park, so you're going to have to wait and see, and then we'll move forward from there. But regardless of how the vote turns out, our commitment is to safety in both Adam's memory and Gary's memory, and for all of the work invested by the folks in this room. We absolutely are committed to ensuring that we close this loophole and keep people safe.
So when the motion is adopted, let's say it passes,
Mhm.
then we go into your bill point by point, put amendments if we need to. Is that how it works?
It isn't a bill, so it's not, it's a motion, and it will be a yes, we're going to adopt, or no, we're not. And then then it's up to the government to move forward. Once they've committed that they will, then they have to, the onus is on them to adopt them. We will, however, be ensuring that, as much as we can, that happens, so.
When it comes to civil lawsuit, it's usually behind closed doors, and I respect that. Is there one right now against any governmental agency, the government, fire department? Is there one currently going on for one of the two or the two deaths?
This is its own proceeding.
I'm asking maybe
Mhm.
not you as an MPP now, but maybe the lawyer?
I'm not involved in a civil process. There was a civil process on the Kendall side as against the city. That was stayed for a reason relating to the Workplace Safety Insurance Act. But there is an ongoing process against Mr. Harrison personally, who was the private trainer.
Yes. Now, that brings my last question, maybe to you, Mr. Brunt. You went to court, I think, last month to Walkerton to ask a justice of the peace if there was a matter to lay criminal charges against Mr. Harrison, and also I think against the Hanover Fire Department. I guess we didn't hear anything from there. Does it mean that the justice of the peace decided that there was no matter to
I
sue?
think you probably got a little bit of information that's not quite 100% correct. I did not, my family nor myself filed paperwork. There was paperwork filed,
By the Colonel?
but individually, from a personal level,
Okay.
okay? But it is an in-camera item.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And now we're gonna find out about the vote, the issue?
So that'll be later this afternoon after the debate, so you'll have to stay tuned. I do tweet.
You do? Then I will follow you.
Fabulous. I will look forward to that follow, and I will look forward to tweeting that it's successful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.